He didn't leave in anger. He left with a delay. No goodbye message. No explosion. No announcement. Just a slow refusal to keep showing up in places that kept shrinking him. There's no ceremony when you fade like that. One day, you're in the group photo. The next, you're not even tagged. His name was still on the record, but his body has stopped clocking in. Every room became harder to walk into. Every handshake felt like proof he couldn't give. He told himself he'd return after he rested, after he figured it out, and after he felt like himself again. That is how you disappear without dying. Stop explaining, you stop correcting them, and let the absence speak for you. It wasn't official. There was no form, no meeting, no warning. One week, he just didn't show up. Next, he kept not showing up. And eventually, no one asked if he still belonged. There are many ways to collapse. Some look like crying in public, others look like eating alone in the hallway, then skipping the next class. He kept telling himself it was temporary, that he'd bounce back, that this was just a phase. But every semester, the page stayed blank. Every time he sat down to begin again, his chest tightened. He wasn't depressed, he was just no longer convinced he could survive the version of him they wanted. The school gave him a locker, top row, end of the hallway. He never opened it once. He walked past it every day. Sometimes he stopped, leaned on it, and pretended to adjust his bag, but he never turned the dial. Something about it felt final, like if he used it, he was agreeing to stay. So, he let it stay locked, and in some strange way, that became a choice not to belong, not to commit, not to pretend. Years later, he would think about that locker, about how strange it was to have something assigned for himself, yet feel like it was never his to open. When someone disappears quietly, the world rarely notices. There is no headline for walking out of your own life in slow motion, no applause for declining invitations, skipping class, or letting your name fade from the list. Yet, this form of collapse is more common than we admit. Most people don't fall with spectacle, they fade. Think about history. Whole empires have collapsed not through sudden invasion, but through corrosion, a slow refusal to sustain what no longer carries meaning. Rome didn't burn in a night, its citizens withdrew piece by piece until there was nothing left to hold them together. Private collapse works the same way. On the outside, it may appear to be laziness or disinterest. Inside, it's a strategic retreat from the structure that no longer fits. Psychology tells us that withdrawal is not always weakness. Sometimes it's the nervous system recalibrating, cutting off unnecessary exposure to survive the pressure. A student stops showing up, not because they're incapable, but because every appearance feels like trespassing on a life they can't sustain. That's not drama, that's self preservation. But there's a tension. Collapse in private often leaves no witnesses, no validation, which means the person must decide if their exit was escape or transformation. Did they vanish to avoid the weight? Or did they vanish to rebuild it differently? The answer shapes everything that follows. Even in strategy, retreat is not always defeat. Generals from Sun Tzu to Napoleon used withdrawal to reset the field. To collapse in private can be a way of burning the full story, so a sharper one can be drawn. But that's only true if the collapse leads to recalibration, not permanent hiding. So, the question isn't whether someone collapses, everyone collapses. The question is, when you vanish, do you do it to escape yourself or to return as someone the old room can no longer contain? It didn't feel like a place to grow, it felt like a place to wait. He wasn't failing, but he wasn't building anything either. Lectures blurred, the hallway conversations felt like reruns of someone else's show. He walked from class to class as if he were doing a job that never told him to pay. At first, he blamed himself, too distracted, too distant, too tired. But deep down, he knew the problem wasn't energy, it meant something. He wasn't learning how to move forward, he was learning how to stay still in a way that looked productive. That's how the trap works. You look busy, but your story doesn't shift. The things that broke him never showed up in the syllabus. The real lessons happen when no one is checking attendance, no test for being left behind, no assignment for hearing them laugh and knowing it's about you, no grading sheet for how many times you had to show up with no sleep, no help, and no one noticing. There are other lessons too: how to smile while defending yourself, how to write a paper while shaking from the conversation you didn't expect, how to pretend you're fine just long enough to leave the room. None of it made it onto the transcript, but it shaped everything that followed. They'll say school prepares you for the real world, but if you already lived it, you know. She was the only one. He let close enough to see the cracks. It wasn't dramatic. No fight, no name calling, no closure. She just started replying slower, stopped asking, stopped waiting. And he let her because he didn't know how to explain the version of him he had become. Not bitter, not angry, just not able to carry someone else's weight while still holding his spine together. She didn't do anything wrong. She just reached the limit, and he respected it enough not to beg. Some people leave not because they don't care, but because they can carry what you can never get to unpack. Not all wounds are visible. Some don't leave marks, they leave patterns. The scar that doesn't bleed is the one that changes how you move without anyone seeing the cut. In schools, companies, and even families, they were told the visible test is the one that matters: grades, certificates, performance reviews, all the measurable markers of progress. But the real lessons, the one that shape identity, rarely get graded. Learning how to keep your voice steady when you're the punchline. Learning how to hold your ground when you walk into a room already dismissed. Learning how to keep working when exhaustion becomes your native language. None of this shows up on a transcript, yet these are the conditions that forge strategy. Psychology has a word for this: hidden curriculum. It's the unspoken rules and survival tactics that no one writes down, but everyone absorbs. The scar that doesn't bleed is what the hidden curriculum leaves behind. The permanent adjustment you make so you can move through hostile terrain without collapsing. History is full of examples. Consider soldiers who return from war zones. Their bodies may be intact, but their wiring is changed. They read every room differently, scan for exits, calculate risks, before others can even sense danger. They carry scars you can point to, but those scars dictate every choice. Or look at the leaders who endured exile or imprisonment. Mandela spent decades in confinement. He emerged not with open wounds, but with a scar that rewired his patience, his timing, and his ability to wait for the right moment to strike. The danger is this: when the scar doesn't bleed, outsiders assume you're fine. They don't see the fracture, so they misread your withdrawal as indifference. But those who carry the invisible scars knows the truth. Sometimes survival means keeping the wound hidden so you can keep functioning. Here's the shift worth noting. Scars don't only mark damage, they can mark adaptation. They remind you that you're already been broken in ways most people can't imagine. And because of that, you move differently, maybe slower, maybe sharper, but undeniably different. So, the real question is this: when life leaves you with scars no one can see, will you let them limit your range, or will you let them harden into a structure that carries you further than anyone expects? Some lessons don't come from books, they come from keeping your head down and your ears open. He learned how to stretch one meal into three, how to spot who would flake before they made a promise, how to walk like he belonged, even when he didn't. No one taught him how to survive campus politics, how to answer when they ask you why you look tired every day, how to pretend you understand the lecture when your brain is busy calculating what's left in your wallet. This wasn't self pity, it was self preservation. And if you're the kind of person who got through college without learning how to disappear inside a crowd, you were one of the lucky ones. Pretending takes more energy than people think. It's a constant calculation: how much to share, how much to hold back. By the time he got home, he wasn't exhausted from the workload. He was exhausted from the performance. He had to rehearse every answer, smile through enough to avoid a check in, sound engaged enough not to raise concern. People talk about burnout like it comes from too much work, but sometimes it comes from too much acting. And by the end, he wasn't breaking. He was just too tired to keep the show going. He didn't talk much about it, but it was there: a quiet kind of anger, not explosive, not loud, just heavy, like carrying something sharp in your coat pocket. He was angry that he had to be twice as composed, angry that showing pain made people uncomfortable, angry that most of what he built would never be seen because it didn't come with a certificate. He didn't lash out, he didn't burn bridges, but he did withdraw, not as revenge, but to carry his anger in a way that didn't cut the people who hadn't earned it. Some people vent, some explode. He built a structure around it. He called it growth. Survival doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it seems like pretending, smiling when your chest is burning, nodding while your mind is counting coins, answering questions with rehearsed lines so no one asks again. That's what it meant to stay when you're already gone. Sociologists calls this surface acting, showing the version others expect while hiding the weight underneath. It's exhausting, more often draining than the actual workload. Because every day becomes performance, the cost isn't only time, the cost is identity. You begin to forget what your real face looks like. History shows the same pattern. In court and dynasties, survival often depend on the ability to perform loyalty while quietly holding escape plans. servants at Versailles, advisors in imperial courts, spies in wartime. They stayed in the room, but their minds lived elsewhere. Staying when you're already gone is not weakness, it's camouflage. But camouflage has its risks. The longer you wear the mask, the more you wonder if anything real is left beneath it. You became fluent in the word fine. You perfectly half smile that stops questions, and over time, you measure your worth not by truth, but by how well you keep the act alive. That's the danger, mistaking performance for resilience. Yet, there is strategy in this posture. Enduring without broadcasting collapse is a skill. It means you can hold shape in hostile ground. It means you can conserve energy until the right moment. It means you can exit clean without trails of noise. This is where survivors separate from performers. Performers collapse when the audience leaves. Survivors keep breathing even when no one is watching. So here's the tension. Staying when you're already gone works in the short term, but in the long term, it can erase you. The real test is not whether you can act, but whether you know when to stop acting and begin building. The question to live with is this: if you mastered the art of pretending, will you use it as armor until you're ready to strike? Or will you let it become the cage that convinces you the mask is all you are?